This conference strongly reaffirms our commitment to providing quality education, encouraging and developing free inquiry, developing international character, preparing students to play constructive, worthwhile, and responsible roles in society. I have high expectations from all of you as you experience diverse points of view. Visit new horizons, become restless researchers and learners, and be the beacon that everyone looks up to. Best of luck, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kasuri. As mentioned by Mrs. Kasuri in her address, we find ourselves here today after a thorough process of reflection and deliberation. Through the various working groups and academic conferences over the years, 4 main themes have been identified for further development and exploration. The purpose of this conference is to concentrate on these 4 basic themes, which are, as already mentioned, but I'll repeat for your benefit, the power of diversity, new ways of teaching and learning, reframing early childhood education, teacher development for sustainable development, changing education through leadership, innovation, and development. Along with these 4 streams, there is the present need to discover new ways in which education can be used as a tool to rebuild our country in the wake of the devastation caused by the floods this year.
At times like this, it is interesting to ponder for a few minutes that the Chinese word for crisis is the same as their word for opportunity. In facing this rather somber task of rebuilding our educational infrastructure in the aftermath of the floods, could there be opportunities to devise new and more appropriate and more advanced systems for educating our children? Could new technologies help bring access to even larger numbers now that there's a real and present need to do so? If necessity is indeed the mother of invention, then this is precisely the time to be thinking in unconventional ways about how we are to create the schools of tomorrow. This is exactly the time to come up with brave new ideas for addressing the challenges posed by the current scenario.
Now to set the direction for this conference, I would like to invite to the stage the speakers for our first panel discussion. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Mary Louise Holley, Dr. Saeeda Shah, Mr. Thomas White, Mr. Norbert Pachler, Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy, and the CEO of Beaconhouse School System, Mr. Kasuri, up on the stage. Mr. Kasuri would also be moderating this discussion. Mr. Kasuri's entrepreneurial and technological leanings were evident whilst he was at school, still at school, when he set up Pakistan's first computer magazine, Micro. His early efforts to modernize and develop the school system began with the conception and launch of the ETAC, Emerging Technologies Across the Curriculum. That ETAC initiative, whereby, according to which teachers in over 100 Beaconhouse school systems underwent training in order to implement the greater use of technology in the school.
Mr. Kasuri's desire to alter traditional teaching and learning systems led to the conception of a much larger endeavor, which has come to fruition through his organization of the various School of Tomorrow conferences, and more tangibly, with the establishment of TNS Beaconhouse in 2007. Unparalleled in Pakistan in terms of its unconventional approach to education, TNS is a progressive new school that focuses on experiential learning and is largely an outcome of the learning that has been generated through conferences such as the one today and many more to come. Mr. Kasuri has also been involved in the development of strategies to expand the school system, and this promises to make Beaconhouse a respected international brand. Schools have thus far been established in the UAE, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, Oman, Malaysia, and the United Kingdom. Having met Mr. Kasuri quite recently, I was first struck by his passion and then by his humility. I believe that Beaconhouse is far more than a business enterprise for him. It is a way for him to contribute something meaningful and long-lasting to the landscape of education in Pakistan. I found him to be unashamedly unconventional and open-minded in his outlook, and very bold in his vision for the future. So it is my great honor to ask him to say a few words and lead the panel discussion now.
I'm very pleased to be here today to launch the first panel discussion. We have quite a number lined up over the next couple of days, and I must confess that I'm a little bit nervous to be in the company of so many PhDs. Whilst I was researching or doing a bit of research on you guys last night, I realized that I may well be the only person who's not a PhD on this panel. Tom, please tell me you're not a PhD. Okay, because I believe that the others, fortunately or unfortunately for us, are. Anyway, the objective of this particular panel, as you all know, is to try to set some direction for the rest of the conference. And I realize that it's unlikely that we're going to conclude anything, and that's not the objective, but I just want to touch upon some of the key themes for the conference. And as Mrs. Kasuri mentioned in her speech, the 4 key strands or themes for the conference today are: number 1, early years development. Then there's professional education or teacher development. We're also looking at innovative teaching and learning approaches. And finally, educational leadership. Well, I shouldn't have said finally, because the other extremely important theme that sort of underpins all of these is the reconstruction of Pakistan through education. Because what we want to do is to see how each of these areas can play its role in reconstructing Pakistan, particularly the millions of children who have been affected by the floods. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've got 5 extremely distinguished, I was about to say extinguished, but yeah, 5 extremely distinguished panelists with me today. And I'm just going to quickly introduce them. At our right, or at least on my right and possibly your left, there's Dr. Mary Louise Hawley. Dr. Hawley is Professor of Teaching, Learning and Curriculum Studies at Kent State University in Ohio. She's also the co-director of Igniting Streams of Learning in Science Education, and I'm going to request you to talk a little bit about that later. Dr. Hawley has done a lot of work in learning communities of teachers, students, teacher scholars, something we spoke about a little while ago. She is also the founding director of the Faculty Professional Development Center at Kent State University, which she established 12 years ago. Is that right? Today, Dr. Hawley represents the professional development strand of the conference on this particular panel. Next to Dr. Hawley is Dr. Norbert Pachler, who is Pro-Director of Professional Learning at the Institute of Education, which is part of the University of London. In 2007, he founded the London Mobile Learning Group, which is apparently, I'm told, a group of researchers who will research cultural and media studies, sociology, pedagogy, educational technology, learning design, etc. And this is again a theme which we'll discuss a little bit later. I tried to count the number of books that you actually wrote last night. I think I managed to find 12 or 15. So it's quite incredible, 12 or 15 books Dr. Pachler has written and co-written. He's also done a lot of work on education technology, mobile learning, e-learning, etc. Even though Dr. Pachler could potentially represent any of the strands of the conference, but today he's going to represent the new ways of teaching and learning, which is one of our 4 themes or strands. Next to Dr. Pachler, we have Dr. Saeeda Shah, who is a program leader for the MSc in Educational Leadership program at the University of Leicester. Dr. Shah supervises and teaches master's and PhD students. So Tom and I could potentially learn from her. She's published extensively in international research journals and serves on many editorial boards. She has also worked in higher education, both in Pakistan and in the UK, for 3 decades. And today she's talking about educational leadership on this panel.